Thank you. Okay. Well, we're going to discuss alternate locations for the dog park. Mark Resnick has submitted a report, and I'm going to start off with our town manager to go over that report.
I'm going to summarize Mark's 3-page report. Hopefully you all have a copy of it. He was requested by me through the board to go out and evaluate some parcels of town-owned land possibly used for a dog park use. He visited 7 sites. The sites were the Lane property, the former town landfill on East Belcher Road, Lincoln Hill Camp on Oak Street, high school property behind the high school, Gavin's Pond Water Department property, land behind Cohasset River Park, and Payson Road Recreation Center. To basically describe each parcel, some of the limitations, the pros and cons of each of the parcels. I reread the report a couple of times, and I basically think there's only 2 possibilities on the list that could be considered. And that's basically the Lane property and the former town landfill. There are limitations and restrictions as you read through some of the information presented for the other sites that may not be easily addressed to use it for a dog park location. With that, I'd open it up to the board.
Andy, you said the Lane property, what was your second?
The former town landfill site on East Belcher Road. There would be a cost to develop either one of those properties, but if you read through this and with understand Mark's comments and remarks, those probably have the least impediments to overcome to build a park.
If cost is a factor, perhaps that's something that we can quantify going forward.
We'd have to
look at
further investigate the cost,
user fees,
the cost of
donations,
amenities to build a park, and we'd have to have Mark and Bob Swanson, our highway superintendent, do some further calculations, cost estimates for either location.
The bottom line is, Andy, that Mark has identified 7 potential
locations,
relocated areas. It's a good list. It may not be comprehensive. One of the parcels that I'm interested in looking at is the one we must use for recreation purposes next to the public safety building behind the auditorium. It can only be used for recreation. I think that there may be other parcels that people know about, and maybe in the course of discussing this, we would be able to come up with something else. But I mean, this is a great start. I think it's exactly my recollections. It's exactly what we asked you to do, and in line with our motion, we've identified some potential sites that could bring some reasonable resolution.
Anybody else?
I echo exactly what Jim said. I agree. I think it's a great start. I mean, it is along the lines of our motion. I want to thank Mark for doing the report. I have only seen this report over the last few days here. I think I picked it up probably over the weekend, so I haven't had a chance to get out to these sites and see for myself. I think Concom has probably gone out to most of these, at least in our conversations. I think they've been out there in the last couple of days. So I'd like some time to get out there and look at them, to examine some additional properties that I know have been brought up to me from the community. I wish they brought them up to Mark, but they didn't. But again, thanks to Mark for doing this.
Paul, you're talking about properties in addition to the 7?
Correct, yeah.
You don't want to get poison ivy again, Paul.
No, I don't. But I think,
I already got it for you, Paul. So
there has been things brought up. I don't know why they weren't brought up to Mark or why they weren't studied, but there is a couple of additional sites that I want to look at, and I think it's a good start. But we need time to move on from there.
could you identify those other sites for me, Paul?
If I knew them off the top of my head, Bob, I would. I'd be more than happy to get them to you tomorrow. I mean, I have. I keep track of the phone calls that come in and where I should look, and I'll get them to you.
Because
we can walk it ourselves as long as you don't want to get the poison ivy like that.
I've got it. I'll live with it.
Yeah.
Linda? You want to say right?
No, thanks for the work. I know it was difficult, but I have a feeling that these sites that at least the ones that were pointed out in the memo were actually looked at by the Conservation Commission and the dog park folks originally when they had the idea to start a dog park, and there was probably reasons why they didn't pick there and they chose Cocasset River, but obviously anything that we're going to have to spend money on is not, I'm not in favor of, but that's down the road, I guess.
What I think that we're trying to accomplish what I took away from the last meeting is that we are trying to buy some time so that we can work together as a community to do two things, which is move the park from its present location and restore the peace and quiet of Milton Lane, and find a place where the town can come together, recognize the work that has been done, that the number of people that enjoy the dog park, and find a location where it is more in harmony with the existing neighborhood. And if we have at least an opportunity to look at these parcels, my expectation was that we would come together as a board, and we would request our counsels in this litigation to go to the land court in concert with Attorney Valenzola and request that the court continue generally the trial rather than force a trial on August 6th to a status conference in the beginning of October. In the meantime, we take the 8 weeks and evaluate these parcels to determine whether or not we as a town want to relocate the park. That's my understanding of the reason we asked Andy and Mark to find the spots and why we're taking it up tonight.
That's exactly what the reason was. Does anybody else on the board want something to say? Sam, you want to put in on this?
We're in a situation now where we're on track to try the case.
I'm sorry, I can't hear you, Sam.
Sure. The case, as Jim said, is scheduled for August 6th. There have been discussions about a continuance. Obviously, as counsel for both the Conservation Commission and the Board of Selectmen, a decision about joining in a motion to continue the trial, as Mr. Thrasher was outlining, would require the decision of both bodies. And I gather the Conservation Commission next meets on Monday, so that for us to be able to enter into any proposal along the lines that you laid out would require us to meet with them on Monday as well.
I appreciate that position. However, I don't think anything would prevent us from, if you feel strongly that that's necessary, in light of the compromise that everyone is seeking, I don't think anything would prevent us from going to court tomorrow on a motion with the plaintiffs and this board and simply informing the judge of exactly what the situation is and seeing if the judge himself would agree that it was appropriate to move that trial in light of the discussion and potential vote of this board tonight.
Well, sure, the plaintiffs or any party can file a motion to continue at any time. I thought you were talking about an agreement, a proposal to the judge from all parties to continue the trial.
Well, we did have a commitment from Attorney Gellerman last week at our meeting that if we identified potential parcels, that we would file a uniform, a unified motion.
You did not.
Excuse me.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Excuse me.
Yeah, no, I
Don't
mean, no
talk,
such
excuse me,
commitment.
Dick.
Okay.
I want this to go uniformly. If you want to speak, raise your hand. If it gets out of control, I'll adjourn the whole room. I'm not going through this anymore. James, could you repeat your...
I was just going with the motion.
No, I'm just asking, Dick, could you explain that?
Yeah, but I
No, I don't want to speak for Dick. That's not fair.
No, I'm asking Dick, because he was about
Jim, you
to
said
speak.
that I made a commitment. I made no such commitment at all.
Let's clarify
Dick,
this.
we can't hear you back
I
there.
mean, you filed, you had a motion that there would be, it was the board's motion, that if there were a suitable location found, then it was your position that you would file a joint motion for continuance. I said clearly at that meeting, and you agreed, Jim, that wasn't the night to raise the issues about who had authority to tell who to do what. And it wasn't. It has always, as you know, been my position, respectfully, that the selectmen do not have the authority to direct the commission with regard to how the substantive position they want to take on the merits of this case. That's my position now. It has been all
Dick,
along.
again, I'm sorry, but I can't participate in this if we can't hear you.
Why don't you join us, because I'm a bit under the weather. So in any event, the bottom line is that I don't think the selectmen, with all due respect to this board, have the authority to direct the Conservation Commission how it proceeds in this litigation. It's the one thing that four lawyers sitting at this table all agree upon. It's an unusual event, but let me finish. I think it's counterproductive, frankly, to go there. The commission said that they would consider alternative locations. They are considering these alternative locations. They were unable, Bob couldn't talk to this, they were unable to have a quorum to make a decision on that. As I understand it, they're going to meet Monday night to do so. And I would urge the selectmen in the community's interest to see what they say.
Sure. Let me just read the motion that this board approved in the minutes a couple of hours ago unanimously. Motion by Jim Thrasher that over the next 2 weeks the town manager and the town planner will attempt to identify a possible location for a dog park, and if such a parcel or parcels are identified, then we will file a unified motion to continue the trial and to determine whether the identified locations are suitable while we work through the issues of liability, user fees, rules, regulations, and the application of the dog control restriction bylaw. Mark seconded it. It was voted 5-0. And my understanding was that was what we were here to discuss tonight. Now, this is, at this point, it is and remains a political problem. This board is not attempting to exercise authority over the land. It is attempting to compromise and negotiate a political solution. So it was my hope that we didn't devolve tonight into any acrimony, that we come together and we recognize the value of putting off a trial decision in an attempt to forge a reasonable community-wide compromise. And unless we take some time to evaluate these parcels and to learn from our mistakes, if we force this issue to a trial, the damage, in my opinion, will be irreparable. And I'm trying to avoid that politically, with all due respect to your legal positions.
Jim, if you misunderstand, I don't talk to your political goals, and I appreciate that. And I've worked very hard to get you there. In fact, I've worked very hard to get you there. I'm only saying that that's the selectmen's vote. You need the commission's vote. Similarly, maybe they will or maybe they won't. I've worked very hard to get the town to review these additional parcels, to persuade the commission to agree to do so, and they very generously did so. I don't disagree with your political position, Jim. It's just that I don't think that your vote as a selectman binds the commission. It's as simple as that. Which isn't to say that I don't think that the commission ought to consider it, and I urge them to do so, and maybe they will and maybe they won't. But they don't have a meeting tonight, and you can't bind them, with all due respect. There it is.
What is your suggestion at this point, Dick?
Well, I mean, I understand that, I think the selectmen's position to try to continue to find a location which is non-troublesome to any citizen in town, that's what this is about, is a valid one. That's what Jim has been preaching all along, and I applaud him for that. It's a valid position. He said to me a year ago, people shouldn't be forced to sue their community, and I hear that. So my suggestion is that, just like you said, these are good suggestions. Maybe there are more. Continue to look at them. Bob has done so. Bob apparently is very open to look at these other locations. Let the commission do that. See what they do next week. There it is.
Linda?
Well, it seems like the commission meets on Monday, and we have to meet next Tuesday anyway, so why don't we wait and hear back from the Conservation Commission that they're ready to, that they agree that these sites are something to look at, and that they want to continue it. I do have a statement that I'd like to read, Mr. Chairman, at some point.
Okay, Bob, now, how would you like to move forward with this? Do you want to discuss this with your committee and meet back with this board on next Tuesday, so that you can put your input on, we can somehow get to an agreement together, or?
I'd be happy to give you a thumbnail sketch tonight of the sites. I walked every site today, and obviously not every member of the commission has walked them. I'll give you thumbnail sketches. We will discuss it at our board meeting Monday night, and give you a full report next Tuesday night.
So you will schedule
I'll have
advertising
Esther
meeting for us, you to be with us on Tuesday.
next Tuesday. But I'll give you a thumbnail sketch tonight,
Okay?
Good night.
if you like.
Wait, so Jimmy, just let me hear him out.
Well, I want, is it your personal opinion, Bob, that we're...
Okay, now, okay, number one, it's not my personal opinion, okay? I'm acting as the chairman of the Conservation Commission.
okay. Then it-
Personalities are out of it.
I agree with you. Is your position as the chairman that we're better off as a town forcing the matter to trial than trying to work out a solution community-wide over the next 8 weeks?
Well, going back to the proposal by the proponents that we postpone the trial, one of the statements in there I completely reject is that this, I think it's September 15th, that they will close Kilcasset River Dog Park. That's not going to happen.
We're not talking about that tonight, Bob. We're
Okay,
talking about trying to
but that's
forge a
part-
community-wide effort to come together and heal what has become an extremely divisive civil problem.
I agree. It's out of hand.
So-
And I'm very upset with the whole issue. However, as you appointed me to the Conservation Commission, I am acting as now the chairman because, well, events happen. I'm acting the best that I can as chairman of the Conservation Commission. And the commission is unified that this is a proper use of the land. Okay, that being said, we have always said that we're open to suggestion for other locations. That's what's happening now. We're looking at other locations, and I'm willing to give you a thumbnail sketch on the ones that Mark has presented to the board.
What we're discussing tonight is whether or not this board is going to request that the trial be continued. That's really what's before us, not the merits of individual parcels, which can come over time. So this board hasn't talked tonight about closing the park. It hasn't talked about
But
authority.
that was the proposal by the proponent, or the plaintiffs, that the dog park is closed on September 15th.
But it's our motion, Bob. We're acting on the motion that we took, not having anything to do with the
Okay.
proponents
All
or
right.
the opponents.
Okay.
All right, James, can you just finish your thumbnail, and then we'll move
Okay.
on from there?
The Lane property, which Andy has suggested is the prime property. And I have not checked the deed on that. From my understanding, there's a 50-year moratorium, no structures, and a fence would be a structure, or is allowed on the Lane property.
Can
Well, can I just check?
Yeah.
Let me just jump in for 1 second. The one caution I want, and I did give this to the commission and to the board, to the extent that any property that you've identified has legal impediments, my suggestion was don't worry about them at this point. There may be ways to cure this. I told Bob, I mean,
But that's my understanding, that there's a 50-year moratorium on any structure, so.
we do it this much? Is there anything that intrigues you in that report? Instead of, getting into the back and forth
Okay.
and everything, what parcels of property in there would you consider, or do you think the board should consider?
All right, the former landfill, unfortunately, when they were digging to expand the landfill, they breached the water table. They've created a wetland in the bottom of it. It's unfortunately now a wetland down at the bottom where it would be used, so it's non-usable as a
Okay.
dog
Instead of going through the ones that you don't like, how about just identifying one or two that you might consider?
What's that? It's a pretty big area.
Was that?
It's a pretty big area. You eliminate all of that property?
I did not walk the entire property, but it's where they went down and got the gravel out. They created a wetland. And
Okay, I understand that.
they shot themselves in the foot on that one. Other than that, Lincoln Hill, I had suggested that, but that's, there's no water there available. Getting there for handicap, making it ADA accessible is very difficult.
Well, just to be fair to everybody here, I think we're talking about a potential site. I don't think we need to get, I think it's up to your board to get into the length of discussion on what that situation is. But is there anything that intrigues you there?
Unfortunately, no. In a nutshell.
All right.
Sorry about that.
Before I open it up to the crowd, anybody on the board want to speak? Paul?
Yeah, I'll just reiterate, Mr. Bodie said nothing intrigues him, but again, we've had this for a few days, this report from Mark Resnick, which is dated July 18th, and we haven't had the ability to get out there and examine each of these locations. There hasn't been a vetting process amongst this board or through the town manager or the town planner. We haven't been able to ask those questions. I think Mark Resnick was directed to prepare a report to find locations that may be suitable. However, they need to be examined further. And I think the motion that was made last week was that, at least that this board made, and I can't speak to Conservation Commission and what they're going to do. I think our vote is independent of that, as it was last week. The Concom certainly didn't consult with this board before they made their vote, as you know, Dick, the night before, and I don't think we need to wait for that next week. This board makes votes independent of their authority. We're not going to ask to close the park tonight, at least I'm not, because we don't even want to get into that situation. But this board has an obligation to live up to the motion that was adopted 5-0-0 last week, which was that if a report came to us to identify a possible location for this dog park, that we go forward and ask for a continuance. And I think that's what this board needs to do tonight, based on the motion that was adopted last week.
And I think, was the word viable used in that motion?
To identify a possible location.
Possible.
The thing is, I mean, Mr. Bodie can speak to viability from Concom, but we can't. We haven't gone on exam, at least I haven't. I don't know about the rest of the board, but, we don't know what's viable or what's not until we have that discussion and vet each of these properties.
Does it make more sense I'm asking, to have them come back to see if they can concur with anything? I mean, he was one man speaking, he's the chairman, but there's
Sure.
7 members of that board before we take the vote, is my question.
No, I think we're obligated to take the vote to ask for continuance because there's been a list of possible locations that have been identified.
Here's a possibility, Mark.
Yeah.
We discuss it, if we vote to direct a motion to continue in conjunction with the plaintiffs, it could be brought before the court with notice maybe to Concom, they're represented by the same council. Council explains to the court that this board has made a motion, it's joined by the plaintiffs, and if the court maybe rules, or the court maybe says, well, come back and see me Tuesday, and let me know what the other defendant has to say. That's a possibility, gets the ball rolling, gets it before the court. I don't think that a Massachusetts court is going to force a trial in the face of a concerted effort to get the case settled when a community of 16,900 people comes before it and says, give us 8 weeks to see if we can work this out ourselves. That's what I think we're here to do tonight. That's what I'm urging this board to do.
Sam, can you respond to that?
Well, I think there's a couple of scenarios that have been laid out. As I said earlier, any party or any collection of parties in the case, there's 3, basically. There's the plaintiffs, the Concom, and the Selectmen. The Plaintiffs could file a motion to continue at any time by themselves. They could file one in conjunction with the Selectmen. They could file one in conjunction with the Selectmen and the Conservation Commission. Any mix and match you want is possible for people filing a motion with the court.
At the point of order, Mr. Chairman.
I'll get to you in a minute, Mr. Valenzola. Any other discussion amongst the board? Paul?
Did the Conservation Commission have a meeting scheduled for tonight?
No, we did not have a quorum. We have 2 members on business trip and 2 members on vacation. They take their vacations on Concom meeting schedule, not Selectmen schedule.
Okay, I thought one was specially noticed to happen tonight, so
No,
that's not
we did not.
I do have a further question on
Joe, you got the floor.
the letter from the Conservation Commission to the Mass Association of Conservation Commissions talking about, gee, if the selectmen vote to shut it down, will you come in and help us out? Is that the, just Mr. Curtis's letter, or is that the whole
That was
commission?
Mr. Curtis's acting as vice chairman at the time.
But was that letter voted on, or was, do you know?
I was not present at the meeting, no. I was on vacation at that meeting.
Okay. I'd like to read a paragraph from that.
Sure.
It reads, Cocasset River Park consists of 71 acres which were donated to the Conservation Commission during the 1960s. About 3 acres were set aside for the town's swimming facility and was open from the 1960s until 2000. It was closed due to continuous vandalization of the gates in the bathhouse. This vandalization dramatically increased after a small local builder constructed 8 houses on a new street called Milton Lane, which runs parallel to the park. The swimming facility was forced to close. Once closed, the vandalism completely stopped. This is the only building in Foxboro that was consistently damaged. Now, I read that, and, you know, there are 2 things in that letter. One is where you ask someone, Mr. Curtis, asks for help from the Mass Association of Conservation Commissions, which I think is fine, because all's fair and, you know, whatever, legally, hey, can you help us out? This paragraph is troubling to me because, and I wish he were here tonight, because I'd like to ask him where he got the information, because it infers to me that the vandals are folks who live on Milton Lane. And I don't know if that's the intended inference, but I think a fair reading of it, one would think that that's the case.
Paul,
Paul, if you...
excuse
can I
me, hold on.
respond?
Hold on.
Okay.
I'm going to respond to it. I mean, that's something we really don't need to get into, don't
No,
you?
I think we do, because it's our, we appoint these committee members, and it's on Town of Foxborough Conservation Commission letterhead, and at least one fair characterization of this paragraph is basically inferring vandalism of certain, you know, they're vandals. And that really troubles me. I think that that's wrong, and I think we ought to discuss it as a board, whether or not committees which we appoint should be writing letters that are basically can infer someone's a vandal.
I understand your point, but are we getting way off point is my point. We're talking about another subject instead of the subject we're supposed to be discussing, are we not?
I think that this is imperative that we discuss it, because I think it's very important. I don't think it's something that we should hold off another 2 weeks to
Well, I'm talking about
discuss.
that letter that you're reading now. Does that have any...
Yes, it does. It is germane, because it's asking for legal help in the event that we look to shut it down, and I'd be curious whether or not they'd be looking for legal help if we simply vote to postpone the trial, to ask Sam Perkins to request trial.
Do you want to continue then?
Well, you know, I guess I'll have to wait until until Mr. Curtis is here, because again, I think that it's very troubling. And when I asked Mr. Galla whether or not why the bathhouse in the pool area was shut down, the response from George Young was,
It had nothing to do with vandalism. It was the water conditions. The water was too low and cloudy one year, and the following year, the coliform counts were too high.
and it's also my understanding, the chief is here, that you're unaware of vandalization being the cause for the shutdown. Not to, I don't want to drag you into it, but are you aware of the history?
Into that bus.
The vandalization, do you have any thoughts on that in terms of whether or not, gee whiz, that was a
Just so the,
cause?
excuse me, Paul, just so the crowd knows, I'm not going to open it up to the audience. You can keep raising your hands till this board is done discussing it. And then, as usual protocol, I will open it up to you.
What's the history of the vandalism of that place?
Once the
Lengthy.
facility was closed for other than vandalism reasons, further vandalism was discovered over a period of years. There was no linkage or any indication of, you're saying that there was a tie-in to the development of Milton Lane, because I believe that development actually went in many years before the shutdown of the park as a viable swimming facility for our families.
Thank you.
Anything else, Paul? Paul, anything else?
No.
James?
Well, I have a motion.
Well, before you motion, I'm going to open it up to the, I had promised the public, I open it up to
Linda
them.
might have one.
And I'm going to Linda before I go to them.
Linda has a statement to read,
And-
and if I may, if we could try to stick to the subject, which I
Well,
understood.
that's what I was trying to do.
We're sticking to our motion of last meeting.
Why don't we do
the
that?
parcels.
Make the motion then, Jim. Make the motion.
No, because you want to read your statement.
No, because, you know what? You just go right ahead. I won't get interrupted,
It's
trust me.
James, but before you make that motion, I think there's some rebuttal out there that needs to be heard.
I'll defer to the chair if you want to.
Well, I would like to, Mr. Valenzola has been waiting to speak. I see 3 or 4 people out there. Mrs. Slattery. I'm going to start in the back. Mrs. Slattery.
I just have a couple of general questions or concerns about what goes on per se. My main question is, you can file any motion you want. What if the judge says, just it's a go on that day? Is that a possibility too?
Absolutely.
Sure.
Absolutely.
So even though we might go through this whole activity here, he might just say, you know what? I don't want it in here. So that is a possibility. Okay. Jim, you keep referring to the fact that we can have user fees. I think we're down that road with user fees. If we reopen a park someplace else, I think we have to be mindful that, I know we went through this with the skate park, and one of the issues was user fees, and they said we would increase the town's liability if we had user fees, so don't just lock us into something like that, because I think that's a huge concern.
Can I respond to that? I agree with you. One of the things I would ask Andy to do at that time would be to get a quote from our insurance company as to what our cost would be to have a specific rider. So that's another issue
We've
that...
talked about this with other issues in town, and my understanding always been, don't you use the fees because you increase the town's liability.
Right, so, but just so we're clear on my position was we want to find out what the cost of insuring would be before we determine whether to put a user fee on, and if so, what that fee should be.
The other thing that I really want us to be mindful of, this dog park where it's located has incredible accessibility for handicapped people. If we start moving it to other locations, putting it farther, making people walk farther, I think, a town has to be very mindful of handicapped and older citizens. This is, in fact, has the perfect, ideal location for people who are older, who are handicapped. I would not want you to see you put in a place that would be less accessible for the elderly and for the handicapped. It is near and dear to my heart. I would be personally offended if somebody has to walk such a distance to get to a dog park that it's inaccessible for them. And I think one of the things that really irritates my soul at this point is the fact that we have people going to Sharon to go to a dog park because they're too embarrassed to go to the dog park in town because of the abuse. And I think it has got to stop. We've all got to sit down, we've all got to work through this somehow, but it's got to stop. And I think everybody has to be careful from this point on because this is out of hand.
Thank you, Martha. Heather?
I just have 2 quick questions. My first question was just to Mr. Mortensen. I wondered if you had actually contacted the MACC about that letter and asked them what their opinion was on the legality of the Conservation Commission's control of the land.
I spoke with Linda Mack, and I don't think she had a definitive answer. She was on her cell phone in a car when she returned my call. And my read on her thought process was, you know, maybe, you know, we would like to jump in. So that's
Okay.
pretty much was the conversation.
And my other question is, I was just wondering if, I don't know, maybe Attorney Perkins or Attorney Keston, or Attorney Gelman can explain to me, because I still don't grasp what the trial on August 6th has to do with finding a new location for the dog park, except that some of the locations being proposed are yet on conservation land. So if we don't go to trial August 6th and find out if it's legal to have a dog park on conservation land, I'm not sure how we could consider any of these additional locations. And I also think that the locations that have been proposed, maybe it was an oversight, Mr. Garcia's motion, I don't know, but the word viable, if it wasn't in there, should have been in that. Anybody could throw out 20 locations if you're simply looking for a reason to continue a trial. But the cost and the accessibility to handicapped people, those need to be taken into account. But that still has nothing to do with the trial. We can go to trial on August 6th and we can win and we can lose, and this whole process can still go on. But at least that legal portion will be behind us and will be behind the town. And whoever wants to try to build a new dog park can do that, whether we win or lose on August 6th. Except that if we don't go on August 6th, we don't know if we could put one on the Lane property.
Excuse me, Mark.
Hang on.
I need to address, Mrs.
I'm going to let you, James. Hang on.
Okay. Thank you.
Are you done, Heather?
I'm done.
Mrs. Harding, the motion, the language in the motion was considered, it was deliberate. I wrote it down and handed it to Pauline, and the word was possible. That was the discussion we had at the board. Wasn't viable because I didn't expect that it was humanly possible for the town to determine in a 2-week period whether or not the particular identified parcel was in fact viable and suitable. So I wanted to buy additional time. It's my goal to put the trial off for a reason. I don't think a trial at this point in the town of Foxborough is a good thing for the community. And that's why I've advocated this middle course compromise, an opportunity to come together as a community to study these other locations. And I would welcome, more than welcome, your particular participation in that venture.
Well, all you had to do was ask, but nobody did.
Mr. Valenzola, you're next.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. I look across the table here and I see 4 lawyers for the town. I don't know if I should be intimidated or flattered, but you know, those saying that this isn't costing the town anything,
Well, we don't need to get into that.
Anyway.
Let's me and you get one thing real clear. I'm not going to deal with it like I did last week. If I ask you to stop, I want you to stop. I want you to stay to the points and not make any accusations, any other
I was just
anything.
trying to lighten it up a little bit, Mark.
Let's get to the point.
And I tried that earlier with the chief, it didn't work.
Yeah, thank you.
I am still intimidated. But,
Well,
anyway,
I'm not.
A couple things, you know, and I say this all due respect to counsel at the table here. You know, it's putting aside what side of the fence you're on for now. It's interesting that we do have a couple of defendants, a couple of parties here, 2 town boards that apparently are going in 2 different directions. And one of them seems to be represented by the council sitting at the table, and the other one seems not to be represented as to what their rights may be as far as what action they can take to direct this litigation, to direct search for a new dog park, and so on and so forth. So that just, you know, that's, and it's really not too much of my business because I represent the plaintiffs, but I do find it interesting that you've got 2 parties here, and it seems that counsel is representing one of those parties, and that's...
At the moment, he's representing both parties.
Well, it's, you know, it's the old, in law school 101, you can't serve 2 masters and you can't represent parties that go in different directions, and it just seems to me that the interest, and again, regardless of what side you're on, you may feel strongly about conservation's position or the selectmen's position. I just don't know how, and I appreciate the efforts of this board to try to come to some resolution and move the process forward and heal, but I find it's just difficult when it seems that the council wants to maybe go in one direction. Anyway, having said that, you know, I know Mr. Bodie's concerns. Can I finish?
I just don't know what you're talking about.
Well, I'll explain it later.
I think I'd like an answer to that. I'd like an answer to that. Dick,
What's the question?
which council are you talking about?
Well, there's attorneys sitting here at the table that are commenting about what should be done with respect to this case.
There are attorneys, right here.
Well, that's what I'm trying to understand. Your attorneys or the conservation?
Both.
They're both.
I guess the point I'm trying to make, and I'm not doing it well, is that how can you serve two parties that are obviously going in different directions?
Well, it hasn't been determined yet, Ed. It really hasn't been determined yet.
As much
that we're
as
going in different
Look, let's talk,
directions.
and I say this with all due respect.
Thanks for your observation, but...
No, and I appreciate that.
And Frank, if you got that,
but with all due respect,
we don't need that.
Mr. Bodie,
Sorry.
he's not happy with the other locations. Bob, I'm not surprised, and, I didn't...
Been to any of the sites?
But, yes, I have. I didn't expect to sit here and have you say, look, some of these might work. We all know where this is going. We all know how you feel, and whatever, whether it's personal or what have you. If you think that we're trying to get control of conservation and tell the Conservation Commission what to do, you're mistaken. This case was never about that. This case boils down to some very simple points, which is it just doesn't belong in the backyard of these citizens. Just like it's an important issue with respect to handicap access and the elderly being able to reach property. It's also important consideration that those residents that abut this property receive some consideration and some respect, and regardless of whether this is the right spot or the wrong spot. It may be the right spot. A judge may rule that way. A judge may not rule that way. And I said this last time, anyone that thinks this case comes to a close on August 6th, regardless how this judge rules, is mistaken. To try to resolve this and come together, I'm not here dealing from a position of weakness. This case is going to keep going, whether we win or you win, and no one wins at the end of the day if that happens. So I don't know why you have taken this so personally. This isn't about your control and conservation land.
Well,
look, let's talk.
Stop. You guys, knock it off. No, hold on. I'm going to make a point here. All right. Last week you made a statement that said the judge. I think it was you. Correct me if I'm wrong. The judge and Paul, it was you. The judge in Boston does not know what's right for Foxboro. That was your statement, right?
Yeah.
Well, I don't think Ed Valenzola from Mansfield knows what's right for Foxboro right now. And my point is being that, yes, if the two boards split, we'll get down that road. You know what? I think that's exactly what you want to happen. Because that automatically would make for a postponement of the trial.
Not necessarily.
I think it would.
Not necessarily.
From my legal counsel, I've spoken to quite a bit. Actually, I've spoken to legal counsel in the last 3 months more than I have in 4 years. Yeah. So you're getting off point. So if you want to stick to the point, I'd appreciate it, because we're not going to get into...
Mark, we all have our observations as we go through this process, and so those are mine. Let me just let me make a couple of additional points. The proposal that the dog park would close September 15th, that was an early response when Attorney Sam Perkins contacted me after a June 12th hearing and reached out and said, as a result of a selectmen meeting, there would be a proposal that we continue the trial date if another site can be located, something to that effect. And then we responded and put a little more in there, and one of them was that we try to set a deadline of September 15th. That was only out there for discussion. No one's pushing that now. If we try to look at other locations and continue the trial date, we don't expect the dog park's going to close until either one or two things happens. The judge rules that it closes, or you find another location and it closes. I think that's the only way that this can proceed right now. Otherwise, we'll be here for another 5 hours trying to figure out when it should close. So that is not really in the equation right now, as I understand it. Some of the, and I won't get into a lot of the details because I think you're right, it's not necessarily the pros and cons of these sites, it's just the fact that there are sites out there to consider. But some of the same reasons that there are problems with these sites are the same reasons that there's problems with the Cocasset River site, the deed restriction, wetlands. I think one of these locations is a natural heritage rare species site, as is the Cocasset River Dog Park. So there's a lot of similarities if you're going to reject some of these locations. So I was just responding to what you said.
No, what you said is totally inaccurate. It's totally inaccurate, so let's not get into that.
What I just said is...
You just
the
said
line
that
park-
Cocasset River Park is a natural resource site for...
It is.
The judge determined it wasn't.
No, okay, let's go on record on this. That entire site is a natural heritage resource site. The judge determined that by putting, no judge determined anything. Natural heritage determined that by putting a dog park there does not constitute a taking, as defined by the
But
bylaws.
it have to
That's
be over a
different.
percentage of... All right, now
That's
you're getting
different. It's a
way off
natural
track.
heritage site
Way off
for the
track.
wooded turtle. But don't tell me, Mark, please, all due respect, that I'm mistaken.
Mr.
but I'm
Perkins,
not.
can you clarify that statement for me, please? Because you're a lot better on what happened about the natural resources and all that.
Actually, I think what...
Mr. Chairman.
I'm asking Mr. Perkins to speak here. I want him to refer to that.
No, I think what Ed has said is exactly right. There's a process when any area, like Cocasset River Park, is within a designated area that the Natural Heritage Board has determined may be a habitat. There's a process you go through, and the board tells you whether it's a habitat where certain activities would cause some risk to wood turtles. We went through that process. The board said there is no risk here to wood turtles. We presented that to the judge, and he said, in response to a motion the plaintiffs had filed to shut down the park because it was a risk to wood turtles, the judge said, the people who are in charge of wood turtle protection tell me there's no issue here, so I'm not going to shut down the park. That's where things stand. It is. And I think it is true that one of the other areas that's been designated or as a possible site for a different dog park also will have to go through that process.
Okay.
Can we, I do think
Yes,
that
I'd
your
like
earlier
to-
suggestion that we get back to the issue at hand, which is the
That's what I'd
continuance
love
issue,
to do.
probably would be the focus that we should talk
Yeah,
about.
let me conclude my comments, Mark, if I could.
They're going to stick to the point. I mean, instead of getting onto the scare tactics and the other...
No, Mark, please don't
I really-
mischaracterize my comments.
Well,
please.
I'm sorry,
We
but...
listen patiently, and I would appreciate the same respect and the same consideration. We have patiently shown up at all of these hearings, especially in the last several months, and we're getting ready for trial. We actually have a couple of depositions in the next few days. It was supposed to be today, but we put them off because of the hearing tonight. So once we move forward after tonight, I mean, certainly there can still be discussions, but this process moves forward. And anyone thinks that, this is like TV, there's going to be a trial August 6th, and the credits are going to roll at the end of the day and it's over. That's not a scare tactic. It's just, it doesn't seem like the right thing for the community. I speak on behalf of my clients, not Ed Valenzola, who's from Mansfield, but on behalf of my clients and, in the town, because this thing is just going on much too long. So I would ask you to consider and move favorably with respect to the what you voted on last time, which was if you identify sites, there would be a joint motion to continue the trial date.
A joint motion
I believe that's...
from the Board of Selectmen and Conservation Commission.
I think
Or
that
from the
we've-
plaintiffs and the
Right,
board.
I think that our council has successfully convinced me that they don't have authority to join the Conservation Commission defendants, but that doesn't necessarily mean they can't present the motion, and they could inform the court that there's another defendant that hasn't voted and joined in. The court could take action, it couldn't take action. It could say, no, never mind, or it could say, I'll give you the continuance. It could say, well, let me know next Tuesday what your other defendant says, and I'll give you an answer.
Okay. This lady's been waiting in the audience. You're the last one from the audience that's going to speak, because we're going to get into the attorneys and we're going to end this soon.
I wanted to go back to the question of whether the word viable was used in the meeting 2 weeks ago, because I was there too. And I know the word viable was bandied all about.
It was.
Instead of being he said, and everybody else said, aren't there recordings that, and I would ask that you guys would really check this out and determine, because I think viable was in there. And
It wasn't in the motion, ma'am. He's absolutely correct, but it was used on the board. It was used in discussion, but was not in the motion.
Was not part of the
That much I know.
Could you just, Mark, hold on.
James?
Jim, just for the official record, name and address.
Oh, I'm sorry, ma'am. Name and address.
Claus, 15 North Broad Foxboro.
Did you get that?
I'm sorry, the last name?
Anita Claus, Kloss.
Okay. Heather,
I don't have a new question. I just was hoping someone could answer my other question. I still don't understand why we can't go to trial on August 6th and still look for new sites for the dog park.
Maybe we will. But the question on viability, I don't recall the word viability used more than once. Suitability was used a couple of times, and when I brought the motion, I was very clear that it wasn't a suitability answer that we could gain in 2 weeks. That's why the word was possible. And I believe I had a question to Attorney Gellerman at the time, but the DVD will, someone can transcribe that and know for sure when. Frank, when are you going to put out that DVD?
They played all weekend, actually.
Oh, okay.
I've watched it 5 times.
Yep.
Viable was used many times. Excuse me, Mr. Feeney. Mr. Feeney, you wanted to talk to rebuttal?
Yeah, Mrs. Harding asked a question, and I'm one person. I'll do my best to answer it from my perspective, Heather. And there's a great cost, I think, in going to a trial. And I don't expect you to see it that way. I don't expect the people in the audience that are passionate about the dog park to see it that way. I don't. Look, I've made a living in labor disputes, hanging from cranes and yelling at people, and I could never see the other side. And I understand the passion. I do. I absolutely understand the passion. I don't expect you to see it from outside. But in this chair, in these 5 seats up here, we're expected to try and create a balance and look at the whole town. And there's a great cost associated with going to a trial. It's always advantageous, as all these attorneys, I think, have agreed at one point, to settle it before it goes to trial. Again, the costs on office staff in town hall, the cost for us just doing this and not going forth on other business like the water and sewer issue that we excuse me?
This is your job. This is what you're supposed to do. This is what these people are paid for. This is why you're here. Represent the whole town and not just these 17 plaintiffs. I don't understand. I don't understand why you're bending over backwards for them.
No.
Continuously.
You're making an absolutely great point, and that is that we have to look out for the entire town.
We have 400 signatures supporting the dog park.
Right. And I've said continuously since I've been elected that, you know, the wants of the many can never trump the needs of the few. And that I've made it consistent, a consistent policy, I guess, from my point of view, that I work to try and preserve and protect the neighborhoods. Understanding that there's certain things that are going to come forward in the future that maybe I'm not with the neighborhoods. But the fact that a judge might say that they have, the Conservation Commission has every legal right to operate a dog park there doesn't make it right. The fact, and I remind you, because some of you are the same people that are going to come to me and say, Paul, the fact that the state legislature and the state courts say that CPV has every right to put a power plant on the other side of the line in Walpole doesn't make it right. The fact that some of you have come to me before and said, Paul, just because the state legislature and the governor want to put a train stop, a commuter line in Foxboro, it doesn't make it right. And I consistently work to preserve and protect the neighborhoods. Just because a judge may issue an order saying that they have a legal basis to operate a dog park there doesn't make it right. Now, we have an opportunity, as Jim said, on countless occasions over the last couple of weeks to kind of heal as a community. We're obligated to take that step and do that. Now, I voted against closing the dog park when I had the opportunity a couple of months back. And I did that because I didn't think that that was the right solution at the time, because if there's enough proponents that want a dog park, then we should act towards that. That we should look towards presenting a comprehensive package, like Mr. Thrasher said last week, so that we alleviate a lot of the issues, either from the neighborhood or some of the legal issues that we all have questions about. Now, I understand the passion. I trust me, I do, because I feel this passion. I wear my heart on my sleeve on a lot of issues. But you have to understand that right now we have to act on behalf of the entire town. And the best interest of the town is not to take this to a divisive trial. Now, we're going to, hopefully tonight, make a motion to stick with what we talked about a couple weeks ago, and that's to examine the locations for viability and suitability. Now, if viability wasn't in this motion, and we want to talk about semantics tonight, and that was nothing but a political ploy by another board or by people that supported this motion supposedly at our meeting last week, then those people need to be ashamed of themselves. I know I made a commitment, and that commitment was to examine the viability of each of these locations. And in doing so, to try and reach a compromise, to go forward and reach a solution that doesn't divide the town any further than we have. Again, I don't expect you guys to see that. I don't expect the proponents of this park that believe in that park so much to understand that. But please understand that we have to look at the entire issue. You know, Mark, I was somewhat offended by your characterization of Mr. Valenzola being from Mansfield and others talking about other towns. Look, if we're going to get geographically snobby in this whole issue, then we need to look at over 600 and some odd postings on a bulletin board, much of which is very inflammatory, much of which has been written that's had personal attacks on members of the community, members of this board, and other members in town government. That's unacceptable. That's unacceptable, but it hasn't been said. It hasn't been said. I understand the passion, but at the same time, that's very divisive. There's been things written in the public domain that no matter what the site is, if it's not superior to the one that's there now, then it's not going to be accepted. Now, I can't speak for Concom. They've never said that, but many of the proponents have. That's, again, unacceptable. It shows that there is a lack of reason to go forward and reach a solution. So, I mean, that's where we're at now, is I think that this board needs to make a motion soon to live up to what we said 2 weeks ago, which is to identify possible locations and then ask for a continuance.
Thank you, Paul. I need to remind you of one thing. They're the Hornets. Mansfield Hornets.
Yeah.
You know, I'm sorry.
You say the same thing to Jay Barrows.
Well, he did have the blue and gold tie on earlier.
Yeah.
So, okay. Who's going to make a motion?
Mr. Chairman, could I just,
Absolutely.
before the motion is made, just to make sure that when the motion is made, we're all on the same page about where it would go from there. If the board does decide tonight to join in a motion with the plaintiffs to request a continuance, since my firm represents both the board and the Conservation Commission, obviously the court will see 2 out of 3 parties have made a motion. And normally the court would then give the third party an opportunity to weigh in and take a position on the motion, pro or con. My understanding is that there will be no decision, can't be a decision from the Conservation Commission about taking a position on the motion until after they meet on Monday.
Or they could have an emergency meeting.
They could.
They could convene in 2 days.
2 members are on vacation this week and 2 members are away on business trip. I have no ability to get a quorum this week.
Okay.
They could also, understanding that you and Lenny represent the same defendants, indicate that if it's acceptable to one defendant and there's no prejudice, no harm to the side that's not yet appearing with a quorum, the judge could decide to act and grant the motion at that time.
Well, the judge can decide to take up any motion on an emergency basis without having heard from all the parties. But I think, Jim, what you were suggesting was that we as counsel for both you and the Conservation Commission could somehow suggest that since there's no prejudice, the court shouldn't wait to hear from the Conservation Commission.
No, what I'm suggesting, Sam, is that if the board votes, you take the motion in and you explain to the judge, I have a vote of one defendant, I have the cooperation of the plaintiffs, and we'd like to present this motion to you. The other board is at least fractionally aware of the motion, but hasn't met because 2 are on vacation and 2 are on business trips. 4 of them are away. It's possible that Judge Long might look at his calendar and say, well, maybe I will continue this thing until October. Why don't you inform your Conservation Commission clients that we're going to put it on for a status. All of that could happen, but none of that can happen unless this board votes to take some action and ask you to go in and do something.
Sure. I just wanted to point out that the normal process is that if the motion is filed, the court gives all parties an opportunity to weigh in.
And as one of the members of the community weighed in earlier, Judge Long could say no.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I think at this point, we're at a point in time where if a motion's made, the selectmen, say, let's make that motion with the plaintiffs and conservation, I guess their position would simply be they haven't had a chance to weigh in.
Right.
They don't have a quorum right now. It would be up to Judge Long to make a determination if he wants to continue the case.
If he hears it as an emergency. The normal thing is they don't hear it for 10 days.
Well, usually it's 7 days. I think Sam and I got the judge's schedule the other day through the clerk, and we might be able to get something to Scott Smith this week and just ask him to have even a conference call on it and see how he feels about it.
It might even be a sense. Sometimes you lawyers can get a sense, Judge. We're going to be coming in I think that the land court, and especially your firm, is particularly sensitive to handling these difficult kind of political problems that don't have anything to do with the substantive law that you intend to argue and prove. It's a different thing, and one of the reasons I think this board, regardless of whether we've shared your opinion, has respected what you've done, is that you have consistently let this board know, as I believe you've let Concom know, that I got two defendants. If you diverge, we have a problem. So we're trying not to diverge. We're trying to continue to work together.
Sure.
All right.
I don't see a divergence at this point, but obviously we do need to, the court needs to know that one of the parties hasn't had an opportunity to weigh in. And as Lenny pointed out, the normal process is there is at least a week for the parties to respond before there's actually a hearing.
Lenny, do you have anything to say?
No, I mean, I just echo that. I mean,
Okay.
you know, the judges make the final decisions on anything.
Right.
So it's up to the judge, and I would be, I mean, having done this, not as long as Sam, but most judges are not going to act before they hear from everybody.
Dick, you have anything to add, Cindy?
No, just, I think it's perfectly clear that, I didn't make it clear before, certainly the selectmen, on behalf of the selectmen, can take the position that you're proposing to take tonight. By suggesting that the Conservation Commission has its independent authority over this, in our opinion, over this parcel, did not mean that you cannot take a position as a board that you wish to take.
James?
There remains one best and reasonable solution to this 2-year-old controversy, that we work together as a community to locate an off-leash dog park in harmony with the residential realities of modern suburban life. This accomplishes two major objectives. It restores peace and harmony to the Milton Lane neighborhood and recognizes the efforts of the local organizers to have a place where townspeople and their visitors socialize with their pets free from the constraints of local bylaws, including the dog control restriction bylaw. Please, let's work together to put principles before personalities, to define our democratic debate by reasoned exchange of ideas, rather than by personal attacks that do not even offer a thread by which we can weave the fabric of resolution. To endure a trial without making every effort to reach a fair and unified compromise is to admit that we in Foxboro are incapable of building bridges to connect disparate views, and instead of engaging in cordial diplomacy, we leave our local welfare to the arguments of lawyers and the rules of trial evidence. It's not productive tonight to recite the litany of opinions, positions, statutes, votes, and motions, pro and con and pro, which have paralyzed our ability to find a common understanding. What is productive is not to give up the effort, but instead to find a way to resolve our differences. It is my opinion, and though only the opinion of one man, it is the considered opinion of someone who has been involved in this community for half a century, that our abandoning our efforts at reconciliation and leading the outcome to a trial ruling will cause an irreparable break in our fragile, if not fragmented, ability to govern ourselves effectively and efficiently. I do not do this office justice if I sit idly by and watch it happen. In the spirit of cooperation and conciliation, in the hope that we can forge a comprehensive settlement of all the issues raised in the lawsuit, and based upon the identification of possible relocation sites and the motion voted at our last meeting, I move that the Board of Selectmen resolve that it is in the best interests of the town of Foxboro to ask for a trial continuance, and that the town manager direct attorneys Keston and Perkins to join with Attorney Valenzola in filing tomorrow a joint motion to continue generally the trial from August 6, 2008, and to request the court instead schedule a pretrial status conference not earlier than October 1, 2008. The joint motion shall inform the court that during this period, the Board of Selectmen and the plaintiffs will attempt to compromise their differences in hopes that the case can be settled without a trial, and that the Board of Selectmen will appoint an ad hoc committee to report back no later than the end of September as to the suitability of any of the identified parcels for use as a dog park. The ad hoc committee shall be known as the Dog Park Search Committee and shall be chaired by a member of the Board of Selectmen, vice chaired by a member of the Conservation Commission, and shall include at least one plaintiff and one of the primary park organizers. The Board of Selectmen will further seek unbiased and disinterested applicants to fill 1 to 3 additional seats on the search committee, and that the town manager report back to this board next Tuesday as to the outcome of the motion to continue.
Second.
Motion made second. Any discussion? Linda?
Yep. I think I want Jimmy to read that again. Just, others may have seen
Just
it
the
before,
motion,
but I haven't.
James?
I don't mean, I just need the motion.
What's so funny? I missed it.
I thought just the motion was the part we needed, not the whole thing.
I think
Well, I think Jim knows what I meant. Unless he wants to read it to me, but there's more discussion. Go ahead.
You're out. You guys are out. Okay, Linda?
Well, just as earlier this evening, I was put as chairman of the committee. I guess we'd be looking for a chairperson of this, from this board. I'm still really not comfortable voting without hearing from the whole Conservation Commission, knowing that they meet on Monday. We could have an answer back Tuesday at our meeting and make a decision there. I just would feel more comfortable if we were together on this motion, and I don't know for sure that we are, but I do have a statement too that I'd like to read if I could.
Absolutely.
Thank you. The dog park has been in discussion since I came on board in May of 2007. From the get-go, opponents and proponents of the park have come in front of the Board of Selectmen. It was stated that the land is under the management and control of the Conservation Commission, and I believe that's still to be the case. The abutters have since formed legal action against the Board of Selectmen as well as the Conservation Commission for several different reasons. Basically, they believe that the park was formed without going through proper channels and questioning whether the park is considered passive recreation. The bottom line seems to be not in our backyard. I can't speak to as if proper channels were followed from the beginning of the process. I can, however, state that since the lawsuit has been in front of us, many things have changed at the dog park. It's because of the persistence of the abutters and their lawsuit that all the proper regulations are posted, and the park seems to be much more in line with what it should be. The Conservation Commission and the dog park management team should be commended for listening to the abutters' concerns and making the many changes in hopes that both parties could somehow coexist. The hours have been decreased tremendously, and the noise must be much less, as fewer people dare to enter the park for fear of getting involved with what has become an embarrassing situation for the town and its leaders. Many of our neighbors have decided to travel outside of town to other dog parks to exercise their pets without the fear of being singled out or persecuted for entering our park here at home. When I was elected, I made the commitment to uphold the principles and bylaws of the town and speak for the community at large. I have only received one phone call from a family that wants to close the park. I have received many phone calls and had many conversations with folks who love the park and want nothing more than to be able to let the animals enjoy an area that is free from cars and other dangerous situations for a couple hours during a couple days throughout the week. It's unfortunate that it's come to having a judge make a decision for our town. However, it is what it is, and the abutters have the right to challenge the town. We've already spent the money to defend the town. The ladies in the front office have already spent the time and energy answering phone calls and making photocopies of documents. Police and the animal control officer have already answered calls at the dog park. All this is in the past, and it will be all for naught if we don't go ahead with the August 6th court date. I believe that if the judge rules that the park is not passive recreation, that the Conservation Commission will not appeal the park, and the park will close in hopes of finding a new play area for our pets. But yeah, if the judge rules that the park is considered passive recreation and the abutters appeal his decision, perhaps everyone should sit down again to discuss other ways to make the park more acceptable to the abutters. Throughout this whole process, I was hoping that the abutters would have been satisfied with all the alterations made from their concerns. It is very disheartening that the members of the Board of Selectmen in the Conservation Commission have been labeled as the unfair parties in this. I believe that all the members want is an ending that satisfies all.
Thank you, Linda. Paul, you have anything to say?
I would just say one thing to explain a motion I made, I forget, 2 weeks, a month ago, about closing the park on the 15th. My goal there wasn't to shut down a park per se, because again, obviously, I think a dog park's a good idea.
Can you not interrupt him, please?
I obviously think a dog park is a good idea because there's so many people who want it here, so I'm not Mr. Anti-Dog Park. I think it's not the right location. So when I made that motion, whenever I did, the intent was to also, at the same time, have this parallel process. I think it's important, although we're not going to do it, to recognize that I don't think there's Board of Selectmen or the Conservation Committee are going to wave a wand and find a new dog park. I think it's this idea of a committee is an excellent idea because I think that we get buy-in from the proponents of the dog park, and I think that the idea in the future that it will be shut down if we don't find this other spot. So I really think we all have to kind of find another spot, or else this current one I hope does get shut down, because I don't think with that threat overhead, I use the word threat loosely because I can't come up with a better word, the proponents of the current dog park aren't going to want to find another spot. So it's simply a motivational thing. I didn't articulate that very well, but I really want to get across the point that I'm not anti-dog park.
There's no more discussion from the crowd, please. This is amongst the board now.
I'm not anti-dog park, and I think my intent with the final date was to really say to the proponents that we can't expect the Board of Selectmen to find it, that it's not, oh, we're going to provide it for you. So again, rather inarticulate, but that's what I was hoping to get across.
Paul, you all set?
Yeah.
James?
Yes.
Okay. All right, before we vote on this matter, I don't think that the Board of Selectmen has the power to do this. I think this is going to cause a lot more controversy that's worse than what we're already facing right now. If it does come to that, I will probably do something that will affect the rest of the board for the rest of the year. I think compromise is the big word here. I think you've seen a dog park go from dusk to dawn 90 hours a week down to 24 hours a week that I understand now. I think you've seen a lot of improvements down there. My personal opinion, there's been a lot of compromise. I think we could all work together on this a lot better at the beginning, but it really flew off the handle right off the bat. Everybody had emotion, and it just went the wrong way from day one. I still think you're going to see yourselves in court. I think it's sad. I wish that the plaintiffs would dismiss the case themselves and come back to the board. You talk about a committee, have a committee, with them, get together with the dog park people and work this all out. 24 hours a week is not a lot for that place to be open. I feel that that's very discouraging that you can't live with that. I live with a gun club. I'm not asking for you to respond. No, I'm just looking at you when I'm talking. And I live next to a gun club, and you don't even want to come down to my house and listen to that thing fire off. It's going all the time. It's really become a nuisance lately, and I've been living with it. It's been there for 50 years. Nothing I can do about it. I used to live up the street, up to the center of town here, where the train tracks came by. The train came in at 3 o'clock in the morning every morning, woke me up for work. You know, other people live next to highways. It's a community. Everybody's supposed to live together and work together. I find it very disheartening that this community cannot come together without going to court at all. I've said this many times before. We shouldn't even be having this discussion in front of lawyers. This is disgusting. The board does not have the power, according to 4 attorneys, to be able to do this. And that's the way I see it. So, we're all going to have to live with this from here on in. And you're going to see a big change in this town, whether or not we come together now and dismiss the case. The plaintiffs want to come together and say, let's get rid of the lawyers, let's get rid of the judge, let's all sit down and talk about this. But it doesn't seem to be going that way. So I'm not interested. I'm not interested. I'm not voting for this in the positive because the Board of Selectmen does not have the power to take this vote. As far as 4 attorneys have instructed me. And I will tell you this much. If it comes to conservation and their vote is against us next week and we have to go into another litigation, things are going to change around there rapidly. And that's all I have to say. So, all those in favor? Aye. All those opposed? Thank you. Andy, I say I'd like to make a motion that we put the rest of the night on to next week.
We had a discussion about next week. Do you want a copy of that motion? Can you stay around and get your copy of the motion? My expectation, at least attach it to the papers and see what he says.
Integrity, Could you please take your discussions outside, please, so we can get on with our meeting?
Can I email it to you tomorrow, Frank? At the
Mark,
We're still in session here.
We're on next Tuesday night.
We're here. We're working, we're asking Andy to report back so that Lenny and Sam don't have to come back. If there's no reason, all they're going to do is say to Andy what the status is, right? Either it's moved or it isn't.
We'll let you all know as soon as we get a decision.
Okay. James, I wanted to make a motion that we shelf, well, I say we allow Andy to decide who he wants to bring in for an RFP next week, as far as council goes.
I think that we should bring in the 4 firms that responded. There's a considerable amount of work. They all look like they have something to offer. I like Paul's idea of being able to question on different aspects of the law. I would expect that whoever comes is going to send a senior, seasoned person. One thing I wanted to ask of Andy, if he would kindly ask them to supply us in advance with an opinion letter no longer than 2 pages on a relatively complicated subject written in such a way as that a lay member of the Board of Selectmen can easily follow the reasoning. So that's the only thing I wanted to ask Andy to ask of these firms in addition to the RFP. I'd like to see a sample of the writing, and I'd like to read it and say, I understand exactly what they're saying.
I know I went on to the website from these folks, and they had documents of what they've done and they've accomplished, and I would assume that the 4 lawyers probably have their own websites, and we could go on and do that also. Right. It doesn't take a whole heck of a lot of time yet. That's what I would think.
Right. Well, the RFPs were comprehensive, but there's nothing like interviewing someone in person and getting a feel and an understanding of what kind of service and value they can bring to the town.
And why don't we have Attorney Gellerman coming?
They didn't respond to the RFP.
Did he know he had to, or?
Yes,
did
he was asked to. He didn't want to.
And I don't think, I mean, personally, Mr. Chairman, I don't think we need to get into a prolonged discussion
No,
tonight about it.
I agree.
think it's just a matter of scheduling. We have 4 firms, right?
Right.
Respond. We
Invite
invite them
them
in. We invite them in and decide, what our course of action is going to be.
Okay.
Is there any issue with, I might call up some of the referrals they get just for grants?
Not at all.
Yeah.
I think, though, we should time them, and we should have them come in 15-minute increments, because I think it's very embarrassing when I show up on a job and there's another contractor there applying for the same job. All right? Andy, I'm going to make a motion that you bring on all the discussion, the RFPs, the town council RFPs.
All 4 firms?
All 4 firms, 20 minutes apart, starting whatever time you think. Because, nothing takes 10 minutes anymore. By the time we say hi to these people, we'll be 5 minutes into it.
And you'll be billed for 10.
Oh, we won't be built for nothing. So could you do that, please?
We'll start the schedule.
I just don't want them all here at the same time.
No,
It's
we
kind
won't.
of uncomfortable.
We won't do it at the same time.
Okay.
Your motion requires a 20-minute calendar mark, and if that's the way you articulated the motion, we're simply waiting for a second on that motion.
Is there a second?
Second.
For discussion.
Yep.
I just think that 20 minutes is insufficient, and even a half an hour, there are 5 of us, even a half an hour is probably insufficient.
So
I would
maybe we
hope that
do
maybe
two
we
next
limit, if we limit ourselves to, I would think each of us is going to have 5 minutes worth of questions for a law firm that we're intending to bring in for the town. So I would say at a minimum would be a half an hour between them.
That's fine. The only reason I said that is if you got 4 people here applying for the same job, and you're the 4th person in line to be able to already have heard the questions, and, it's... So what are we going to do? We're going to draw, see who goes first?
I would say this, though, that these guys are seasoned professionals. I mean, they're not
I
going to be...
never met a lawyer in my life that was a professional, bro.
I've heard all the jokes. We happen to be around number here. Yeah, it was fun.
You're not intimidated.
Never. I'm just
So,
kidding.
no, Mike, I don't think that's a big deal. I mean, I understand your
can see your
point,
point, but as mine...
if they're that, taken aback if you're the first guy, we don't, want
Anyway, we'll do it by lottery when they come in then, see who goes first.
No, I think that we should schedule them. We should say we have scheduled you for an appointment to come in at 7:15 next week, please.
I gave the board a memo outlining the firms that applied.
Yeah.
I'll just go in that order.
Yeah,
That's not like a
Perfect.
Okay?
I would,
starting at 7:15.
the one, Andy, what do we have this matter that should be a report back. What else do we have on next week?
We have a liquor license hearing, and, 1 second. Housing authorities coming in.
I would think that we would want to do the interviews after, rather than first. What would you think?
I would. I do the local...
Start them at 8:30, 9, and 9:30, or is that too late?
Right, you must. You know what? Jim, why don't we bring them all here at the same time? Ask them unanimous questions. You can ask any firm any question anytime you
I
want.
don't like that much.
Well, the only reason I'm saying is, let's just bring them all. All right, we're getting way too complicated here.
No,
But it would be a courtesy to tell them 7:30, 8,
Right.
8:39. I mean, I'd be kind of annoyed if
Yeah,
I
but you
started
know what?
at 9 and...
We never go, our agendas always go all over the place anyway.
Well, I'm sure they'll expect that,
That's what's
but
gonna
the-
happen. That's what's gonna happen, just like
All right, well,
everybody.
let's try. Let's try.
And they better
Starting
get
at-
used to it.
Starting at 7:45.
They better get used to
Andy,
sitting here for long
every
nights.
half hour. Is that good? Starting at 7:45.
Yeah, why don't we do
every
that?
half
Andy, the one request I would make, however, would you ask these firms, please, to supply us with, in advance, a short memorandum, not more than 2 pages?
Big type.
A
Big type.
sample,
Double-spaced.
it could be a real memo, they can
Case
redact
history?
what they
One-syllable
want, but
letters?
I would like to see a sample of their opinion letter to a Board of Selectmen, to read it in advance. Okay? That would be very helpful.
Must be in the office by
Now,
Thursday night.
the
in the
motion
packet.
was, did I amend the motion to be every half hour?
I'm gonna strike my motion, you take your motion.
I'll withdraw my second.
Well, I move that we ask the town manager to schedule appointments with each of the 4 law firms that filed a response to our request for proposal, beginning at 7:45 and every 30 minutes thereafter.
Second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Okay. That's it for the agenda. Paul, I know you have new business. All business would be, right? All business?
But just a quick thank you to a few people. We voted a couple weeks ago to allow Team Kate and their bicycle ride in Foxboro. They came in a little bit wary on Saturday, the hottest days of the year, and there was 10 cyclists that I think were on mile 230 by the time they got into Foxboro within a 36-hour or so period. So they came into Foxboro. Chief Valeri and his department provided a police escort. Chief McNamara and the fire department did the same thing under Captain Triani's direction. They got an escort up to Gillette Stadium, and I really want to thank the New England Patriots, Gillette Stadium, New England Revolution, Dan Murphy and Jesse Enos. We needed a location to have kind of a welcoming event, something that was fitting for these guys, and they stepped up and offered the Northeast Lounge in the parking lot, and it was something that those guys will never forget. They rode and dedicated their 300-mile bike ride to Caroline Miller from Foxboro. And the Miller family was there, and they got to meet these guys. They raised money for Make-A-Wish. They've raised about $250,000 over the last few years. So I just want to thank again the New England Patriots, Chief Valeri, Chief Mack, Michael Keller, Katie there, some people that helped me out with this stuff. And again, it was a great cause, benefit the Make-A-Wish Foundation. So thank you to everybody involved.
Great job, Paul.
Report.
Paul?
I think we should ask Mr. Curtis to come in and talk about his letter and where he got his information.
Oh, let's let that dog rest for a little.
I don't think we should.
Oh, we're not even into that yet. Let's see what the Conservation Commission says about...
It's not about the vote. It's about the paragraph talking about vandalization, because I think it's very important.
We're going to meet with the board next week on next Tuesday, so you can ask him that question when he's here.
The only thing is, I think that if we want to do that, we might want to wait until one of the August meetings rather than to try to press it next week with the 4 appointments that we have, the 2 other matters that are already on. We're not really doing new and old business, and I had a few things that it might be better off we wait a couple of weeks on that.
Fine, but I do think that, this is incredibly important, because again, we appoint this committee, and the things that are stated in here, I think are really interesting, and I, again, vetted the facts, I think, as best I could with Andy's help. I don't think they're accurate, and I think...
Oh, I know they're not accurate.
Right.
But
so if he's in next week, I guess if they're in next week, we can ask them. But I think if he's not in next week, we should schedule.
Ask them that question after Conservation decides whether or not they're going to join us in this venture. Because I think that's more important than that.
I think they're both important, because I think
well, let's make that second instead of first, please.
There's always something that takes precedent, yes. However, I think that it's we need an explanation. Because I think it's incumbent upon us as a board to make sure that committees which we appoint and which we can remove members, that we understand why they're writing these kinds of things. Because I think it's unacceptable.
If you're going to put that on, if you're going to put it on the agenda, then I think we should ask Andy to have that letter in front of all of us too.
We did. It was in our packet 2 weeks.
This week?
No, the prior week, and I didn't.
Well, I mean, if you're gonna
let's move on.
Bring
let's
up
move
those
on,
things,
James.
we should have it in front of him.
No,
he's going to be.
Well, you think he's going to be here?
Well, he's part of the Conservation Commission. He's going to be here in the joint meeting next week.
Right. No, I don't think we scheduled a joint meeting.
I asked them to. I asked Conservation tonight to schedule a joint meeting. Did I not, Andy?
You did.
Yeah, you did.
So they're going to be here, and you can ask that question.
When are we going to
I'll ask it then.
Next Tuesday.
What time?
Hey,
after the 4th interview?
What can I tell you? I don't know what to tell you.
Either the case is going to be continued or it isn't. And if the case isn't continued, these guys are going to be preparing for trial. If it is continued, there's no urgency. It's one way or the other. We're going to know by next Tuesday night.
You won't. I
We might.
You might, but all I'm saying is, the judge could be waiting.
Could be. And in which case, there's nothing to report.
Okay, anything you want to add to old new business, James?
No, not tonight.
Okay, Linda? Motion to adjourn.
Second.
All's in favor?
Aye.
Andy, you have anything else to sign?
Andy.
I signed your whole folder.